Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Basics of Volunteering in an Emergency or Disaster with Dr. Kathy Jorgensen and Ms. Kathy Berlin. I'm Nicole Cass, the CE Program Manager for the MVMA and today's moderator. If you do have any questions during the session, please type them in the Q&A area. A quick introduction for those of you who are not familiar with the WebEx platform so you can actively participate. If you place your cursor on the screen along the bottom, you'll see a series of circles. Look for the black circle with the 3 dots and click on it, and you'll see Q&A option. Click on it and a small window will appear for you to begin typing a question. I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Kathy Jorgensen graduated from North Dakota State University in 1991 with a BS in microbiology and from the University of Minnesota's College of Veterinary Medicine in 1995. In 2011, she completed a master's degree in public health, also from the University of Minnesota. Dr. Jorgensen achieved diplomat status in the American College of Veterinary Preventive Medicine in 2011. She is the coordinator of the Minnesota Veterinary Medical Reserve Corps, and she's been active in agricultural disaster preparedness and response in the state's radiologic emergency preparedness program. She is a certified Fema trainer for 4 radiologic nuclear hazardous courses and is Pro Board certified at the Hazardous Materials Operations level. Dr. Jorgensen serves as the Planning Section Chief in the Minnesota Board of Animal Health Incident Management Team. Ms. Kathy Berlin received her BA in nursing at the University of St. Catherine. Prior to joining the Health Emergency Response Office, her professional career included several years working as a registered nurse at Abbott Northwestern Hospital, followed by a number of years as a school nurse, and then as a public health nurse in the Emergency Preparedness Department of a local public health department. She is privileged to work with the members of the University of Minnesota Medical Reserve Corps. The MRC is a group of individuals who share a commitment to offer their time and expertise to the university and broader communities during public health emergencies. She particularly enjoys the energy and the enthusiasm that students have to offer to the Medical Reserve Corps program. Go ahead, Dr. Jorgensen.
Well, we wanted to welcome everybody today, and we want to thank you so much for spending your lunch with us today. And we hope to provide you with some important information if you are thinking about being a volunteer at the local, state, or national level. There are some differences in the logistics and legalities of volunteering at various levels, and we hope we can clarify this for you. You can certainly look at volunteering at those specific levels. First, you can look at volunteering locally. In the many conversations I've had with city and county level emergency managers, many are looking for animal resources as they revamp their animal emergency plans, or in some cases, write them for the first time. Local emergency managers will likely welcome your input and willingness to act as a resource. And we found in some instances, in an effort to write plans quickly, it's not uncommon for emergency management to fill in a phone number of the local vet clinic or animal shelter without really having a discussion with that specific entity. So if you're in a smaller town where you may be the only clinic, you may be already part of the plan. You might just not know you are part of the plan. There are also ways to volunteer at the county or regional level. The Medical Reserve Corps program is a program under the Department of Health and Human Services. Many MRC groups are coordinated at the county level, especially in the metro areas. If you're in a more rural area like me, we may see the MRC groups organized at the regional level. For instance, I am part of the Central Minnesota MRC group, which includes 14 counties. Veterinarians are welcome to be members of these MRC groups. And in Minnesota, MRC groups are housed under the Minnesota Department of Health. There are also groups at the state level. The Minnesota Veterinary Medical Reserve Corps is a veterinary-specific Medical Reserve Corps group, which includes all the counties in Minnesota. There are also other states that have veterinary MRC groups or a similar program. The Minnesota Animal Disaster Coalition is a member also, the group is a recognized response group at the state level. This group, of which the Mb Mrc is also a member, includes affiliated groups such as the Minnesota Horse Council, many shelters, animal control officers, and some city and county jurisdictions. They provide animal resources such as staffing and supplies for extra sheltering capacity. And a SART is a state animal response team. SARTs are quite common in states that have a lot of activity, such as the hurricane-prone states. Some of them have very robust SART programs. Minnesota has been working on plans for this specific type of group, and we'll discuss that more later on. At the national level, there are many groups with response or resource missions. The NVRT, or the National Veterinary Response Team, is under the Department of Health and Human Services National Disaster Medical System, and they can be requested at times of emergency to augment local resources when they're overwhelmed. They're also quite active in pre-planned events. They often work behind the scenes at various government functions, such as big 4th of July celebrations, inauguration, etc. And to get on these teams, you actually have to have a Secret Service background check, since you are sometimes working in these high security events. And they're often tasked with things like monitoring the bomb sniffing dogs and the horses from the mounted patrol groups. NASEP is the National Alliance of State Animal and Agriculture Emergency Programs. And that was founded in 2009 and is tasked with helping the states work together more efficiently. They have several working groups that have written a series of best practices for a variety of animal and agriculture situations. They host monthly calls on timely topics, and they also sponsor a great summit with many topics around animal and agriculture emergency response. NARSC is the National Association of Rescue and Sheltering, or sorry, the National Animal Rescue and Sheltering Coalition. Sorry, the response world is quite acronym heavy, and sometimes I can't even keep them all straight. And that was founded in 2006 after Hurricane Katrina. During Katrina, there were a lot of response groups deployed to the area. They found they were often duplicating efforts and competing for resources. The formation of NARSC was an attempt to streamline the response and help the groups work together more efficiently. Basically, the groups checked their egos at the door and said, how can we do this better? Many different groups make up NARSC, such as the ASPCA, the AVMA, American Red Cross, Association of Zoos and Aquariums, Code 3 Associates, and they do a lot of training for states and local jurisdictions. They have a lot of resources on their website, and also states have a standing memorandum of understanding with the NARSC partners to help get those resources into the states more efficiently in times of emergency. They're an amazing resources for the states to draw upon when needed.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Kathy Berlin. I'm a registered nurse, and I work in the Health Emergency Response Office at the University of Minnesota. Before we get here, I wanted to set the scene. So I'm going to speak directly about the Medical Reserve Corps program, which is a national program. So right here, I'm going to set the scene by, if you take a look at this photo, it's a photo taken during the attacks in New York in 9/11. And I often imagine, well, this makes sense. Most people here are running away from the scene. So yeah, that makes total sense. And I think of this individual here with the ponytail, the guy that's facing the explosions, that he's a health professional. So maybe he's a nurse or a veterinarian or someone who is naturally inclined to run towards the disaster and see if they can help out, which in reality is what happened during 9/11, is that thousands of health professionals ran toward the towers because they knew that they had skills that they could utilize to help. And as they arrived, they were turned away because there was not a system in place to verify that they were actually a physician or a nurse or a veterinarian or someone who had the skills to help at the scene. So it really was seen as a disaster within a disaster. And so the Medical Reserve Corps program, which is a national program, was developed in direct response to what they experienced on this day. And next slide, please. So oftentimes when I begin my presentations, I ask the audience to imagine if they woke up this morning and they turned on their phone and they were reading their news feed and they saw that there was a public health emergency in their community. Well, we don't have to imagine that today. We know that there, across the globe, that there is a pandemic, an influenza pandemic, and so, or a SARS pandemic. So I just want you to think about how you feel every day. When we wake every day up and we think, what can we do today? How can we help during this response? And so think about that as I'm going through a few slides here. So what is the Medical Reserve Corps program? It's an emergency response program that allows its members the opportunity to be of service to their community during large-scale human and animal health related emergencies. The photo I have here on the slide was taken 2 weeks ago, where our U of M MRC members volunteered to assist with the COVID testing of individuals, activists who were involved in large gatherings in Minneapolis following the murder of George Floyd. So we had over 27 of our Medical Reserve Corps members who volunteered to assist with the COVID testing. Medical Reserve Corps are designed to identify, register, train, credential, and prepare health professionals and others. And the key words are in advance of a public health emergency or natural disaster. Because remember when we talked about 9/11, how individuals heard about, saw it, either heard that there was a problem, they arrived on scene, and there wasn't a process in place to utilize them to the best of their ability. So we have this Medical Reserve Corps program so that we have primarily health professionals and other individuals who have a keen interest in public health emergency response sign up ahead of time. And I'll give you an example of why that's so important to do that ahead of time so we can get deploy our members quickly. The next slide, please. So we're going to talk again, Kathy hit it again. There you go. We're going to talk primarily about the University of Minnesota Medical Reserve Corps. It's unique in several ways. Primarily, Medical Reserve Corps are based out of local public health departments all over the country, and that there are a few that are Medical Reserve Corps that are based out of universities or colleges. We were the first Medical Reserve Corps based out of a university, and we're all the university's Medical Reserve Corps is also the 4th registered Medical Reserve Corps, so we've been around since 2004. Our membership is student, staff, and faculty with current affiliation with the university, and that's really important. I'm guessing that there are some individuals here in the audience today that have been students or faculty or staff at the university. If you currently have an affiliation, you are eligible to join our membership. If you do not, and let's say you're alumni, then you would be a really good candidate to join Kathy's MRC unit. And I can take questions later about this. It's something that we need to be aware of at the get-go. So we have about 2,000 members in our Medical Reserve Corps, primarily out of our health sciences. So individuals in the College of Vet Med, School of Nursing, Dental School, School of Nursing, I think, Public Health, and Medical School. And so student, staff, and faculty are eligible to join, and we have about 2,000 members, which makes us the largest Medical Reserve Corps in the state and one of the largest in the country. Within our Medical Reserve Corps, we've done something rather unique in that we've developed strike teams. So we developed these to better align with member interest and expertise. So for instance, we have faculty within the College of Pharmacy who really are interested in participating in a pharmacological response. Again, Vet Med students, staff, and faculty are primarily interested in responding to something that's animal related. That being said, if you're part of the Vet Med response strike team and we have a human related public health emergency or disaster, you are welcome to join in. In fact, we deployed our MRC in the response to the Drake fire, the Drake Hotel fire. And we had 2 individuals who are from the Vet Med school, who are on the veterinary medicine response strike team, who really wanted to be a part of that deployment, so assisting individuals affected by the fire, and they were welcome to do so. So we have set up these strike teams, and the pharmaceutical response strike team is 100% membership of the College of Pharmacy. However, logistics strike team is open to anyone who has an interest in logistics. So these are a list of our strike teams. Our N95 respirator fit testing team is rather unique as well. We have been, as you might imagine, we've been receiving quite a few requests for the services of this team as more individuals are wearing N95 respirators due to COVID-19. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about our deployments. We've been deployed more than any other Medical Reserve Corps unit in the state, primarily because we have so many members, and it's really the depth and the strength of our membership, including, we have college deans in our MRC, and most of our members are practicing clinicians. So if in MRCs across the country, when they're based out of public health departments, quite a few of those members, maybe the majority of those members in those MRC units are retired. And here at the university, most of our members are practicing. If you're a faculty member and you're a registered nurse, that you are a practicing registered nurse. Next slide, please. So we're going to focus a little bit on our vet med responses. We've had two. Back in 2008, we received a request through the Emac system. Kathy will talk a little bit more about that. So it's a state-to-state request for assistance. And there was some flooding in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa area. And they had at one point between 700 and 800 companion animals set up in a clinic or shelter, and they needed additional staff to staff that shelter. And so we sent down 3 different teams, and this is how it works within our MRC. We put a call out to veterinarians and vet techs, and we said we're going to be sending 3 teams down to Iowa. They were deployed between 3 and 4 days, so 3 different teams. And this picture on the right here is the 9 members that we deployed. We rent a car for them. They don't incur any expenses. So with our MRC, we make sure that they're able to get down there. We rented vans through fleet services at the university. We set them up at a hotel, and we paid for their meals. And they were able to assist the companion animals. And this picture on the left here is one of my favorite pictures. I think to me, it's so rewarding to be a part of something where we are not only helping obviously the animals, but as we can all imagine, the families that had to drop their animals off at this shelter, 700 or 800 at one point, that they knew that there were qualified individuals who were taking care of their animals. So this was a very rewarding deployment. If small in number, I think 9 individuals total deployed. I think the impact that we had, though, we did receive feedback from the requesting agency, which is a junior college at the time that hosted that the shelter was located at. That really the impact of our 9 MRC members was really appreciated and impactful. So it's just part of being a member, I think, of a volunteer organization is that, we have something to offer, but what we get back in return, the reward that we get back and the experiences we get back, are really enhance our own lives as volunteers. In fact, the student here with the kitten came back and told me, he was able to do things that he would have never been able to do in his normal course studies or clinical studies at the U. So he was appreciative of the opportunity. Next slide, please. And then just this past spring in 2019, we were asked by Scott County, they had some flooding as well, and set up a small shelter for companion animals. And I received a call asking if we had somebody that could go and do a quick assessment of the animals. And normally we would not deploy one individual. We would never deploy one MRC. However, we had one of our veterinary medicine response strike team leads. So for every strike team, we have 3 team leads. And Vicki Scala is one of our leads. She's the lead vet tech at the hospital at the University of Minnesota. And she lives in the area. And I gave her a call and she said, yep, I'm gonna go and I'll do the assessments. This deployment was a 6-hour, I think she spent maybe 5-6 hours there assessing the animals. So the deployments can be 5 or 6 hours in length, one shift, or it can be something like Iowa, where we send teams down for 3 or 4 days. Next slide, please. So I'm going to review a few of our deployments to give you kind of more of the breadth and scope of what we've been involved in. During Katrina and Rita, we sent multiple teams down. Again, we sent nurses, physicians, pharmacists. It's a practice of ours. I think it's kind of a goal of mine to always try to include students during a deployment so that they get the experience, and we were able to do that during Katrina and Rita as well. So we send teams down, and they, instead of being at a hotel, you might imagine that there were no hotels to send MRC members. So we were able to set them up. They were set up in cots in large like gyms and things like that. So we did cover their expenses otherwise, and they did not incur others. I don't have any photos here. We've deployed to the North Minneapolis tornado response. We've assisted seasonal immunization campaigns on campus, and our MRC assisted with the H1N1 immunizations. I'll focus a little bit here on the 35W bridge collapse because it's a really good way to illustrate how important it is to have MRC members sign up ahead of time. So volunteers set up ahead of time. Because I knew my membership, I knew that we needed to get some behavioral health folks to the hospitals to support families as they were coming in to meet with their family members that had been injured. I had someone deployed within 45 minutes. So you can imagine how long that would have taken me if I wouldn't have had phone numbers and people identified as far as what their skills were. We also know, I'm going to go directly here to COVID. We've been deploying since February. We've been involved, our MRC has been involved in COVID testing, case investigation. I had mentioned that we have done some N95 respirator fit testing. And then we're also, one of my favorite, again, it's a rewarding experience and something that we're approached by a local community clinic asking if we had any Somali-speaking Medical Reserve Corps members, and they were able to deploy between 12 and 15 MRC members. Quite a few of them were students, fluent Somali speakers, who were asked to call the elderly clients at Smiley's clinic. So it's a community clinic, and they cold called them. They were basically calling them to provide education. And so they'd call them up and they would say, do you have any questions about COVID? And the feedback that we received was that the individuals that were called, and these are mostly elderly individuals, were so thankful that someone reached out so that they could ask questions. And one of the remarks was, I'm so glad you called. I thought everybody who came down with COVID died. And so again, it's a small group, 12 to 15 individuals, but the impact that they had, I think, during this COVID-19 is pretty significant. So it's a program that I'm proud to be a part of. Again, it's a national program, and it's supported. Our university one is supported exclusively by the university. I've included here a photo. I like to include photos. I have more that because my presentation is shorter. It's just good to take a look at this photo and just see that, the individuals deployed here on faculty from School of Nursing, a nursing student, and an EMT, and they're smiling. This is what it feels like to be part of a program that allows you to be a part of a response that's assisting your community when your community members are at their most vulnerable. So I'm going to be available for questions. Let's do the next slide. I don't believe I have any more slides for the U of M.
Okay.
And then I'll be available for questions when Kathy's finished with hers.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you about some of our current efforts in the Mb Mrc. We have a few different programs we work under. One would be the REP program, which plans for emergencies associated with the nuclear generating plant, so Prairie Island and Monticello. So if there was ever an accident and people needed to evacuate, the reception centers are tasked with receiving evacuees for monitoring and decontamination if needed. Evacuees are encouraged to bring their pets along with them, especially if there's little chance they will be allowed to go back home due to contaminate, that area being contaminated. So our group staffs the animal side of the reception center. We've also done some work as well in the ingestion pathway for the animal, livestock, and agriculture commodities. What happens to this if something is deposited in areas of high livestock populations. We also work with the Minnesota Board of Animal Health for foreign animal disease planning and response. And we focus on outreach to county emergency management and associated county level programs such as feedlot inspectors. We also do outreach to first responders and focus on connecting with producers. Enhancing local response is one area where we're working really diligently. We started the Animal Issues Working Group a couple of years ago just to try to figure out everyone who was out there with similar goals. We started with our group, the Minnesota Animal Disaster Coalition, Red Cross, the University of Minnesota, USDA, and various state agencies such as Board of Animal Health, Department of Human Services, Minnesota Department of Agriculture. We basically met up and said, what do we need to work on? And we developed our committees from there. And as we've continued to meet and find gaps in animal and agriculture planning and response, we've expanded the working group membership. We merged with the MVMA Disaster and Emergency Preparedness Committee last summer when we realized that a lot of the same people were attending both meetings. And this committee is far more effective when the various players are in the room working together. We really can't work through these issues in our own little silos. It just does not work well. We now have tribal involvement from various jurisdictions, and involvement from the exotic animal community as well. And we're just really grateful for all the involvement from everyone. One of the gaps that we've identified is that response capacity at the local level, which we have already alluded to, is kind of lacking. So one of the goals we have is to help local jurisdictions develop what's called a CART. A CART is a city, county, community animal response team, depending on whatever works best for that community. Let's say it's a rural area, maybe a county level CART would be appropriate. If it's a city, maybe a city level CART would be appropriate. And we're going to get into that in more detail later on. Our deployments in 2009, we were deployed to Valley City, North Dakota to provide veterinary support to an overflow shelter during the flooding. And in 2015, we worked with Board of Animal Health to plan for our group's involvement if high path avian influenza reoccurred during the fall migration. Luckily, it didn't. I'd like to break down how emergency response is handled at the various levels since they are not all the same. One thing to know, all emergencies begin and end at the local level. The exceptions to that rule would be some sort of an emergency and release at one of the nuclear generating plants, or some sort of attack with something like a radiologic dispersal device or a dirty bomb. This will be a state and federal level response with all the federal bells and whistles coming in, like the planes that do the flyovers to monitor and survey for contamination, and the advisory team, which will come in to help local jurisdictions evaluate risk and advise on policy and response. The other is a foreign animal disease response, which is also led at the state and federal levels with Board of Animal Health and USDA in the lead roles. Now, local jurisdictions will be helpful by providing resources and providing outreach in their communities. And we've already discussed the concept of a CART, which is basically a network of animal and agriculture related resources that are available for planning, prevention, protection, mobilization, response, and recovery related to emergency incidents within their own communities. And you can see for a local emergency such as a flood or a tornado, a CART would be a very efficient means to respond. And this is something we'd really like to see at the local level. You as a local veterinary clinic working along with your local shelter, trained volunteers, would be a very effective tool in managing any animal issues that could occur. A group I really want to highlight is the North Valley Animal Disaster Group in Butte County, California. They are probably the gold standard of a CART. This group came together kind of organically while responding to wildfires in their area throughout the years. Today, this group is a highly trained, proficient group capable of working in their community during times of emergencies. They're great because, as you can imagine, they've had a lot of opportunities to practice and work together. The group includes fire responders, emergency management, animal control, and just about anyone else you can think of who may have an animal or emergency response mission or resources to provide. Their website is full of resources that are available for any group to use. You can download and use them. They are also developing a response app that will also be available for anyone to download and use. During wildfires and other active emergencies, they have a situational report webpage that is updated daily with news, stray animal information for those who are fostering evacuated animals, and information regarding resources that are available. They also have a hotline set up for the public to report things or ask questions. And these guys are really good because, face it, they've had to be good in order to respond to the many problems they typically have in that area of California. And even if your community doesn't have an organized group, you can see that having just an informal agreement to provide resources for local emergencies can be a valuable first step in the process. One important point to note, self-deploying or just showing up on a scene without specifically being asked to be there can be problematic for several reasons. Besides the possibility of just getting in the way, there are some legal reasons why this isn't advisable, and we'll get into the details of that further as we go along today. Volunteering at the state level can include a variety of response options. The Minnesota Veterinary Medical Reserve Corps would be a resource that could be requested by a local jurisdiction, but we need to be officially activated at the state level in order to respond. This would be similar for the Minnesota Animal Disaster Coalition. And we've already mentioned the concept of a SART, and we are working on plans for this type of group. We expect to include many types of groups involved in your local CART. In addition, SARTs often include the university to provide subject matter experts on a variety of topics. They may include producer groups such as Minnesota turkey producers or pork producers, and they often have partners in agriculture industries. So businesses such as Hormel, Cargill, Land O'Lakes would be examples of groups or businesses who may be interested in being part of this. Minnesota VOAD, which is the Minnesota Voluntary Organizations Assisting Disasters, more acronyms, is a collaborative group of volunteer groups in Minnesota. MNADC and Minnesota Veterinary Medical Reserve Corps are both members of MNVOAD, and MNVOAD also includes faith-based volunteer units, teams like Team Rubicon, Red Cross, and many others. So if local jurisdictions are planning to use these types of groups for response, they need to be familiar with how they deploy. And the VOAD resources, including MNADC and Mb Mrc, can be requested by the contacting the duty officer, who will then send it through the correct channels to notify and activate groups as needed. Our group, the Minnesota Veterinary Medical Reserve Corps, needs to be activated formally through the Minnesota Department of Health's MRC state coordinator, even for a local request. The national level response tends to fall under the PETS Act. And this came out of after Hurricane Katrina in 2006. It basically says that states seeking FEMA assistance after disasters must accommodate service animals and household pets in an evacuation. Household pets are defined as a domesticated animal such as dog, cat, bird, turtle that is traditionally kept in home for pleasure rather than for commercial purposes, and it can travel in commercial carriers and be housed in temporary facilities. This does not include reptiles except for turtles, amphibians, fish, insects or arachnids, or farm animals and animals kept for racing purposes. And this does require what's called a presidential disaster declaration, and it allows for FEMA reimbursement for animal-related expenses during the response. And you may be hearing a lot about declarations in the news recently, since a lot of governors have declared various states of emergency for COVID-19 response or even for the civil unrest. For catastrophic events, the governor can declare a disaster, and then we'll send it up to the president to ask for what's called the presidential declaration. And the president can decide whether or not it rises to that level. But once a presidential declaration is made, it opens up a lot of FEMA resources and funding, the PETS Act included. And often these disaster response efforts are on a cost-sharing basis with the state, so they don't cover everything. While the PETS Act sounds like a great tool, it's not a perfect solution. It says the jurisdiction must have a plan in order to request the FEMA reimbursement for animal expenses, but it doesn't say how comprehensive that plan must be, i.e. the reason some emergency managers just insert a phone number and don't really have anything else in their plan. And there are also no standards by which to measure these animal plans. So as you can imagine, for an emergency manager, finding animal resources is not something that's always easy when you don't live in the world we live in. It's a steep learning curve. When we start looking at requesting those national resources at the national level, it's usually when local and state capacity is overwhelmed. I want to highlight some regional resources that have been great ways for states to network and look at regional approaches to common problems. The Southern Agriculture Animal Disaster Response Alliance, or SADRA, was one of the first groups to work together for animal preparedness and response. The states in the Southeast are quite used to disaster response because of the number of hurricanes they have. They started working together and sharing resources. In the Midwest, we have the Multi-State Partnership. Once again, a regional approach for states who share a lot of commonalities to work together, develop regional plans, and learn from each other. And we also have to look at the logistics of moving resources and personnel across state lines. We'll discuss that in upcoming slides as well. We also have those NARS partners, the national teams, many of whom already have a standing agreement with individual states to deploy upon request. The NARS partners are highly trained and have a great deal of experience working within existing emergency management response structures. One of the really exciting developments that has been made available recently is the FEMA resource typing guidelines for animal resources. FEMA has been typing resources for a number of years to help streamline requests for resources and equipment. The animal-related resources were just published last summer. As an example, you can see this library includes definitions for personnel, teams, and equipment. And it's an assurance that the jurisdiction will get exactly what it's asking for. For instance, if we look at this page of the library, we can see they have definition for equipments, different pieces of equipment like cranes, a variety of definitions for personnel, and also a variety of teams. A jurisdiction may request a crane. Well, what size and capacity do they need? How big of an operations crew comes with this piece of equipment? So the requesting jurisdiction picks out the type of equipment it needs, and then it can be matched with an entity who can provide that resource. This is to ensure the requester gets exactly what they need for the response. The last thing they need is unusable equipment or people taking up space. Some of the positions that are typed for animal resources include veterinarians, veterinary assistants, search and rescue technicians, and animal depop specialists and things like that. They have also typed animal response teams, and our group, the MB Mrc, has chosen to align our training with those standards so we can eventually be a more effective deployable resource. Our focus is providing resources for the companion animal decon teams and the veterinary medical assistance teams. The decon team actually aligns really well with our mission in the REP program. And you can see that these teams have the designation of 1 through 4. And other teams that are available on their that are typed now are sheltering teams, depop teams, animal and agriculture damage assessment teams, a lot of different positions and teams that are defined in that library now. And the training for those would be outlined under the position descriptions. Let's look at the veterinary medical assistant team. You can see along the top, you've got the type listed and the various components of the team listed below. So a type 4 team would consist of 1 type 2 veterinarian and 2 type 2 vet assistants. And each of these positions is also outlined in the FEMA library. A type 4 team is a team with the lowest level of medical capability. Basically, a team like this would be requested for something like medical support of a shelter when they are responsible for intake exams, daily assessments of the animals, basic triage. If you contrast that to the type 2 team that has the exact same number of personnel, but the capability to perform surgery and radiology. A jurisdiction may request this type of team if a field hospital needs to be set up. But this gives the requesting jurisdiction a clear picture of what the levels are, and they can select the appropriate type of team for their mission. And like I said, the training requirements for each position are listed under those positions in the library. And while we've made some great strides in animal planning and response, there's still a lot of different things we need to consider as volunteers. There are some hurdles of which you need to be aware before you dive in. And our biggest goal for this presentation is that you have enough information to make sure you are protected if you plan to volunteer. Insurance coverage may be an issue depending on the type of response. Licensing can be a big hurdle, especially if you would like to volunteer outside the state. Malpractice issues can unfortunately come into play in certain circumstances. And funding is another possible hurdle. Who is ultimately paying for the support you are and the supplies you are providing to the response. And all these may be different if it's a local, state, or a national response. So let's talk a little bit about how workers' comp and liability work. As far as that goes, you can work under your own policy if you have one, or if you are under an umbrella policy at your clinic, you may be able to work under that with permission from the clinic ownership. One of the safest ways to volunteer would be to be a registered city or county volunteer. Your insurance should be covered, but you want to make sure. And remember, they have called you, you have decided to help, therefore you have not self-deployed. In an active response, they should be covering the volunteers on the roster, but like I said, you want to make sure. We strongly recommend having a memorandum of understanding, an MOU with the jurisdiction you are supporting, especially if your clinic might be providing supplies, vaccines, or staff to the response. You want to make sure you can get reimbursed for the supplies, and you want to make sure any staff who volunteer are covered. The MRC groups are another good way to volunteer. No MRC coordinator is going to send members out to a response without making sure all of those boxes are checked first. We'll talk more about how this works in a little bit. And this is also another great way to consider doing a CART in your community. In doing so, you've already done the networking. You probably worked on some plans together with your counterparts in emergency management, and hopefully you've worked out a lot of those kinks already. You don't want to be exchanging business cards at the time of the emergency. At that time, it's already too late. And these are other reasons you don't want to self-deploy, because like I said, it can be problematic on several levels, and your workers' comp and liability is just one. So under the Medical Reserve Corps, when you are activated by the Commissioner of Health for a public health emergency, volunteers receive the same protections as a state employee. And if you're interested, it's under those specific resources for you under those chapters in Minnesota statute. If you were requested at the local level, we are kind of back to the same factors we talked about on the previous slide. And remember, we talked about if that problem of licensing, if you want to volunteer in another state, an Emac agreement is a way for you to volunteer safely while protecting your license. Emac is an all hazards, all discipline mutual aid compact and is really the cornerstone of the nation's mutual aid system. Offers assistance during governor declared states of emergency. It allows personnel and commodities to go between states for response. It establishes a firm legal foundation for sharing resources. And the big thing we need to remember is it allows for credentials, licenses, and certifications to be honored across state lines. So it really allows for those worker protections. So an Emac agreement is one way to protect your license if you're going over state lines to practice. If you're going to volunteer in another state, you must make sure that you are involved with a recognized and verified response group, such as one of the NARC partners or an MRC group. And you must make sure that group has a solid Emac agreement in place. Kathy's already talked about how they had to have that when they deployed down to Iowa. We want to help, but you really need to make sure that everything is covered before you go. As a disclaimer, I did not respond to Hurricane Katrina, but I was told of some of the problems by people who spent quite a bit of time down there working under Emac agreements. There were a lot of animal-related groups who responded to the area on their own, and some groups put out volunteers. They put out calls for volunteers across the nation for veterinarians. And unfortunately, those veterinarians who went in good faith but did not have licenses to practice in those states, since the groups who responded on their own did not have an Emac agreement. Hurricane Harvey, we also had some different lessons that we learned and some challenges that we dealt with. The Texas Animal Health Commission did a great job in partnership with Texas A&M's veterinary emergency team and the affiliated NARC partners who deployed under their standing MOU with the state. There were some miscommunications between the Texas Board of Vet Licensing and the Texas Animal Health Commission. The Board of Veterinary Licensing had a large announcement on their website about veterinarians being needed to respond to Texas, and they would be issuing temporary emergency licensure to veterinarians who applied. I don't really think they had a plan in place for those veterinarians who might be showing up. I had been on situational awareness calls almost daily for hurricane response, and didn't even become aware of this a licensing issue until I heard it. A member contacted me because it was on the news up here, like, oh, hey, vets, go ahead, get this temporary license and go to Texas and help. I didn't receive any of the information through my official channels, my normal calls, my normal MRC channels. And because I was starting to get a lot of questions about it, I reached out to their licensing board for more information. So I asked specifically, okay, so you're going to offer these temporary licenses to veterinarians. Where do they report? To whom do they report? What is their mission? What date are they expected to start? And the person who answered me at the board didn't really have an answer for me, but only to say that, well, vets who requested licenses should go to the Texas VOAD website and look for a group who has already responded and signed up on their roster. But this was not clear on their webpage. It was not clear in the information that was sent out afterwards to these veterinarians who requested licensing. So anyway, to my knowledge, it was never changed the whole time I monitored the situation. So I brought it up to some of my Texas counterparts when I saw them at a meeting later on, and they seemed quite shocked that it was on the news up here in Minnesota. It's like, well, why would it be on the news up there? I said, well, it was on the news. So if you had veterinarians who showed up, that's probably why. So the moral of the story is, if you see something like this, but you're not given some sort of itinerary, your mission, your task, no information on where do you report, what date do you report and such, that's probably a red flag that you need to investigate it further. And in this case, volunteers had a license, which was great, but they would have not had appropriate insurance protections as a responder and actually may have been subject to malpractice issues. And malpractice is an area where we've asked for quite a bit of clarification during emergency response. We know that these types of situations, we may not be practicing in conditions that are ideal. Definitely not our normal standard of care to which we are accustomed in our clinics. So what protects a volunteer responder from malpractice? Well, these are the statutes that will protect us, who are registered with the jurisdiction or requesting help from MRC groups. So it basically says that individuals and entities who register with the state or the local jurisdiction and act under the control of that state or local jurisdiction are considered employees of that state or the local jurisdiction for purposes of workers' compensation, tort claim defense, indemnification, and immunity. And the same holds true for a medical reserve corps group. If we're asked for assistance at the call of the Minnesota Department of Health Commissioner, we are deemed a state employee for the purposes of workers' comp, tort claim defense, indemnification, and immunity. So if we're asked by the city or county health board or a city or county jurisdiction, same thing. And these statutes also cover the governor's emergency executive order regarding temporary care facilities as well. As long as MRC groups are acting consistently under emergency management plans, act in good faith, and comply with statutory requirements, they are immune from civil liabilities and receive the same tort protections afforded to state employees. And we hear about the Good Samaritan law, but unfortunately, it doesn't usually apply to medical or veterinary responders. And this is another reason why self-deployment really isn't advised. We want to make sure you are responding at the request of a jurisdiction and under their direction to make sure you are protected from any civil liabilities. Funding is another area where you want to have some sort of understanding in place, particularly if your clinic is helping in a response in your community. How this works may depend upon the type of emergency. Maybe you've been called to help with a trailer accident involving livestock or horses, and how you get paid for your supplies and likely your time is on that sort of a response is much different than if you are providing staff, supplies, and medical expertise for an evacuation shelter. In the case of a trailer accident, you might just be working your job as normal. It's your night on call and it happened. They called you. And in that case, the driver or carrier's insurance may be paying part of the bill. If you are volunteering time and supplying local resources for a shelter, you would want to have some sort of agreement in place with your local emergency management to reimburse the cost of your supplies. And how a response is funded may also depend on the scale. Is it local, which is what we just discussed, or is it an emergency that rises to the level of asking the state for resources? That possibly opens up some other resource capabilities such as mutual aid and some more of the VOAD groups. And if it rises to the level of a presidential declaration, that opens up the FEMA channels through the PETS Act. And it may also depend on what kind of a group you are responding with. As you can imagine, some of the nationally known groups such as ASPCA or Animal Humane Association have some very deep pockets and can respond with a lot of capabilities. But some of our state groups like the Mb Mrc live on grant money, and a lot of our grant money is specifically designated under certain programs and the contracts that we have, and we can't use them for other things. So this is why we feel that having a MOU with whatever entity you are supporting is really important. We need to get reimbursed for supplies since we don't have a lot of extra cushion in our budget. So if you're still interested, I've got some information up here on various trainings that we have available. The basic training we ask for to be an MRC member in our group is ICS 100, 200, 700, and 800, which will actually align you with those Fema resource typing guideline definitions. And it will also, if you wanted to deploy with a NARS partner, and join up with ASPCA or whatever, those actually will suffice. They want all of those if you're going to deploy with them as well. We do have the MRC orientation, which is required to be an MRC member. It's a very short course. And there's also the rep right to know, which is the radiological portion, where we do have to have our members go through, I think there's 3 YouTube videos you have to watch. And then we try to do some face-to-face rep training as well with the different instruments. All of these are available online. ICS is, yes, it's boring for anybody who's already taken it, but it really is the best way to run a response. And it's, once you've worked in the system, for a long time and understand it, it's actually, as my friend Betsy would say, quite magical. It works so well. Other opportunities, the National Domestic Preparedness Consortium offers free courses to registered state and local responders. So if you're an MRC member or a local fireman, whatever, local ambulance crew, you can go take these courses at various groups or in various places like the Center for Domestic Preparedness. They pay for everything. They fly you down there, they fly you home, they cover your expenses for parking. So there's a lot of different courses down there you can take. So that's a really great resource for people who really want to get more educated on this. And then our group, in partnership with Kathy's group and the University of Minnesota, we offer 1 to 2 free trainings per year. The things we have coming up based on when we can do things again, large animal technical rescue training, we do have grant money to hold that class again. We are having a sheltering class, and that kind of came out of our animal issues working group, gap analysis that we did. That is tentatively set for the first week of November. So if there's interest in that, I will let MVMA know when that is being held. We also received grant money for that. We do have some grant money to hold oiled wildlife response class with the University of Minnesota. And then we do our foreign animal disease training with the Minnesota Board of Animal Health. And because I am asking volunteers, whether they're local responders or veterinary responders in our group, I really try to make sure that our training is at no cost, because I'm already asking people to donate their time to come to the training. And then also, they're not only are they doing it on their own time, they're probably volunteers on top of it. So I want to make sure any training that we have is at no cost to our participants. And then in hopefully in 2022, we don't think it's going to happen in 2021. Minnesota did throw their hat in the ring to host the NASEP Summit. We were tentatively starting to plan that, and decided that we were probably best off holding off about a year. But hopefully Minnesota will be chosen to host that. And the NASEP Summit is great. They have everything from donations management to how do I do technical rescue on a giraffe. So there's there's something at that summit for everybody who's interested in doing any sort of response. So just a plug for that. Hopefully life will return to somewhat normal, or something that resembles normal in the next couple of years, because Minnesota is really excited about the opportunity to host that if it can happen. And then some other things that we have available that I was just going to mention, if you are really interested in helping your local community or your county, we do have a lot of different things that we have available to help jurisdictions. We have a veterinary resource guide that's about a 50-page document that kind of acts as a template for emergency management to work on their animal emergency plans. We have a couple of other resources available. Right now, they're available to Minnesota emergency managers on the Amem website, which is the Association of Minnesota Emergency Management. So they can go to that and download it at any time, or they can contact me. But if you yourself are interested in saying, hey, I'd like to help my city or county, I'm happy to send you the information. And I'm also happy if you guys just need help, or you need somewhere to start. Myself and other members are more than willing to jump in and give your community a hand if needed. These are just some training pictures from various things we've had members attend. Up on the upper left is the CTOS training out at the Nevada National Security Site, which is where they do the radiologic training, kind of where it all happened, right where they did all the testing. So for a nuke nerd like me, that was really fun to be out there. Bottom in the middle, that's our large animal technical rescue training that we've been offering, and we like I said, we've got grant money to do that again when it's safe to do it in person. So lots of different things out there that if you're really interested in being a responder, we can get you hooked up with various different classes or whatever would be of interest to you. So with that, I think Kathy and I will take any questions if there are any out there for us.
A reminder, if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A area or the chat area, or if there's something a little more specific you'd like them to address, they have shared their contact information there, emails, and some website resources that you can access. We'll give people just a moment to type in their questions. And in the meantime, I do want to remind everybody who's online, if you haven't already received a phone call from an MVMA staff person and you have not renewed your MVMA membership, you will be getting a phone call soon. And to avoid that phone call, just go ahead and renew, because if you don't renew, you won't be able to join us in future lunch and learn sessions. So just want to remind you of that piece. And if you already have renewed, we greatly appreciate your continued membership. We do have a question if retired veterinarians are welcome.
Yes, retired veterinarians are welcome. We greatly appreciate everybody who wants to join up, and we know that most of the time they hold a wealth of experience. So yes, we have lots of room for retired veterinarians. We're more than happy to have you on board.
Wonderful. Any other questions we have out there today? In the meantime, I do want to thank Kathy Berlin and Kathy Jorgensen for their time today. Greatly appreciate you guys putting this wonderful presentation together. Lots of information to get through. And so I know that people may want to listen to this again. And so I am recording the presentation. It will take me about a day or so, but I will post it to our YouTube channel, so you can find that there tomorrow. And if you have any problems with that, just shoot me an email and I can send you the link. A lot of great information. Thank you.
Yeah, I know we went over a lot of information, and some of it's really confusing because, I mean, I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years now, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around some of the logistical things and the legalities of things. So we're happy to answer if you have more in-depth questions or just something didn't quite make sense. Go ahead and reach out to us. We're more than happy to try to work through it.
We have individuals who I know who are on that have gone through some of the training, and they want to thank you both for all that you do. So our attendees are very appreciative of it.
Well, our pleasure. We love what we do.
I don't have any other questions, just making sure. Yep, no other questions at this time. And so thank you, ladies, for your time, and attendees, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great day. Stay safe.